So I'm going to go ahead and get started because a lot of this is actually review. At least my lecture part today is going to be review. So we're going to take this project all the way through. And so I'll start at the very beginning again, even though it's complete repetition for everybody, but just because I want to be able to walk you all the way through it. And this is the process of taking your terrain from SketchUp, working with it in Rhino, and ultimately creating a model that could be laser cut in the lab. I did also find out, thanks to Brooke's question about whether you guys had access to the lab and whatever, there are some open lab hours this semester. So you could, it's not required as part of this class, but you could go in and use the laser cutters. I imagine you could even use the 3D printers. So it's not required. I'm not going to grade you on any of that, but I wanted to pass that information along. I also found out that there's a tutor that's available in the lab. This is in the 116 lab, if I'm not mistaken. That's available for certain hours each week. I think it's, hold on, let me try to pull it up here. Did I put an announcement in about this? Yes, I did. So it's in the 116 lab from 2 to 4 p.m. So if you guys need a little bit of extra help, you could probably go in and get some help there. And of course, you can always ask me as well. So I wanted to point that out so that you have access to it. Okay, so let's bring back up what we're working on today, which is 213. And this is very much finishing up what we started last class. When you're done with exercise 213, you're pretty darn close to being done with your assignment 202, which is awesome. So when you turn in your assignment 202, you're going to be turning in an AutoCAD DWG file as well as a screenshot showing your red and blue lines as part of that assignment. It should be separate, so you need to turn it in twice, essentially. You're going to have those things at the end of exercise 213, but you can then use those again for your assignment, assuming that everything worked correctly and that you finished it. So let's start from the very beginning. Let's go all the way back into SketchUp. I'm not asking you guys to go all the way back into SketchUp. I'm doing this just for the sake of this is the whole process. So I'm gluing it all together. I'll probably cut through a few phases by opening new files so that you don't have to watch me do all the steps, for example, on the side. But I would start by opening up SketchUp. So let's get down here into SketchUp. And I'm going to agree to this. And we'll pick the architectural inches template. And there we are. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, the figure. We don't need that. And then I'm going to open up the geolocation. When I do this, it's going to ask me to log in. So I have to go in to sign in for a second. And I have to get passwords and stuff. So bear with me. Probably should have already done this. All right, so I'm going to sign in with Google here. Maybe, oh, I have to accept my cookies first. All right, perfect. So now I can bring in the add location. Let's go to next here, next. Okay, so I need to start with a location. So let's see here. Well, maybe we can zoom in on Mount Diablo and get something from Mount Diablo here. Well, here, we'll zoom in. Remember, once I get that box, I'll be able to take a piece of terrain. So I'll go ahead and click on select region. And we're just going to use digital globe here. I'll select the area that I want to capture, and I'll click on import. If I want to see that, I can go to File, Geolocation, and I can click on Show Terrain, and I should get my terrain. There it is. So I can take this terrain and I'm going to save it. I'll go to File and then Save As, and I need to back save it a few versions. So we're going to go back to SketchUp 2018, and I would put this into today's folder. This is helps if I could type here. And I'll click Save. And now it's saved my SketchUp file. So I can go ahead and close SketchUp. I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to bring it straight into Rhino. So I'll go to File and then Import. I do have to make sure that my modeled units are correct in Rhino. Right now they're in millimeters, so that's a problem. So let's go to my unit settings and let's change my units to inches, because I need those two to match. And then I can go ahead and go to File and then Import. And we're going to import that SketchUp file that we just saved. All those default options are just fine. Let's press Z, enter for zoom, followed by S, enter for selected. Let's do it in the perspective view here. And now we can see the whole piece. Let's do some organization. And again, I'm obviously moving a little bit faster through it this time because you've seen it twice. So I'm going to make a layer called SketchUp. And we'll take the terrain and we'll move it onto the SketchUp layer. So let me right click and say change object layer. And now that's on the SketchUp layer. We could turn it off and then we could delete the rest of the layers because we don't need any of those. So let's take those, we'll get rid of them. And we'll make the SketchUp layer active. And we could actually get rid of the default layer as well. So I now have just the mesh from SketchUp. I'll double click on the perspective viewport to make it large. And now we need to contour this to convert this over into a NURBS surface. So I'm going to turn on my vertex snap. There it is. And I'll create a new layer for contour X. And I will then contour this mesh. So I'll type in contour or go up to curve, curve from objects, contour. I'll snap to this corner. Now I need to make sure I'm on axis. So let me turn on ortho. I'll make sure I'm on axis. I'm not snapping to anything. And we'll do my interval at 100 feet. And there it is. And that should be fairly close to what the grid is or the mesh is. So let's do another. Oh, I have to change those because I didn't have them on the correct layer. Let's change object layer so that they end up on the contour X layer. Let's create another layer for contour Y. We'll make that active. And then I'll go up again to curve, curve from objects, contour. So this is, if I had done this, when I go to do it, I'm going to end up with a bunch of points because I was contouring the lines, not the shape itself. So let me undo that, make sure I'm selected on the surface or on the mesh, and then we'll repeat contour. So let me type in contour. If I can type, there it is. And this is going to be contour in the Y. So we'll make sure we're not snapping to anything. 100 feet. And there it is. So I have contour X, contour Y. I'll turn off the SketchUp layer. And I'll look at this grid in the top view. So let me zoom selected. We need to do some cleaning. So let's use the trim command. I'll go up to edit and then trim. We'll trim off all of that. Come down to the bottom and we'll trim off all of that. I'll hit enter to finish. Then I'm going to repeat the trim command. for the sides, trim. Trim that off. And then we'll trim, oops. All of this off. Perfect. So when I'm done, I should have this perfect little grid. So as I've done before, I'm going to make sure that I save this before I do my curved network. So I'll go to File and then Save. And this would go into today's folder, and we'll call this Marsh Creek. I'll go ahead and click on Save. And then I can do my curved network. There we go. So when I did the curved network, remember I had trouble when I did all of them. So I'll select all of the layers, all of the lines in one direction. Actually, let's do it with fewer. Let's select all of these. And then I'll select just the two ends. So we'll go there and we'll go there. And then we're going to do the network surface or the curved network. So it would be under Surface, Curved Network, or I could type in Network SRF into the command line. It's going to give me my 4 points. Gives me a little preview. Pretty soon the dialog box should pop up here. And we'll go ahead and say OK. And this is going to take a little bit of time. While that's working, I'm going to go ahead and open up my file from last class. Because once we get to the sides, I'm going to skip over. So let's go into here. Perfect. I'm going to walk my way over into this file a little bit later. So I'm just getting that up and ready so that you won't have to watch me redo all the lines. So we'll leave that minimized for right now. It's still processing here. While that's happening, we'll start talking about the next phase because I want that to continue. So over here in our exercise 212 from last class, I had this chart right there. So this topography creation chart is beneficial for you because you can use it to determine scale and contour interval, etc. So as I talked about last class, we have over here our scale. So we have things like 1 to 200 scale, 1 to 100 scale, 1 to 50 scale. Those are all common scales at the site level. Down here, we have our architectural scales like 1/4 inch equals a foot or 1/8 inch equals a foot. Okay, so those are all allowing us to select the appropriate scale. So the one that I did last time was 1 to 200 scale. So I'm looking at this third column down right there. And as I come across, it's going to tell me the size. And I told you that the model size that we're making is 11 by 17. So 11 inches by 17 inches at 1 to 200 scale ends up being 2,200 feet by 3,400 feet. So my overall size of this model is going to be 2,200 feet by 3,400 feet. See if Rhino decided to catch up with me here. Good, it did. So let me rebuild this surface. And I'm going to rebuild at 100 by 100. And I'll go ahead and say, OK. As soon as I do that, this becomes a workable file again. Let's put that on its own layer called terrain. I'm going to right click and say change object layer, make that active, and then I can actually turn off contour X and contour Y because I'm left with just this surface. If I switched into my shaded mode here, we could see a little bit more of what that surface looks like. So as I said before, when we look at this chart, if I'm working at 1 to 200 scale, my paper size would be 2,200 feet by 3,400 feet. If I was working at 1 to 250 scale, my paper size would be 2750 feet by 4250 feet. But we'll stick at 1 to 200, 2200 by 3400. So the next thing I need to do is draw a rectangle that is at 3400 feet, comma, 2200 feet, enter. And so that rectangle right there is representative of that 11 by 17 inches at 1 to 200 scale. So let's look at it in the top view so we can try to figure out where it belongs on this. If I switch over into shaded mode, we can kind of get a sense for, I think that's actually Marsh Creek there. And we can actually move this around and decide what piece of the model we really want. So let's say we like that piece there. Once I've done that, I'm going to use the project command, which we've used previously in this class, to project that rectangle onto the surface itself. So let me select the curve. I'm going to go up to project. So it's under curve, curve from objects, project. Alternatively, I could type in project. And it's going to ask me to select the faces or polysurfaces to project onto. I want to project onto this surface right here. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. And when I do that, it takes the rectangle and it projects it out on the surface, right, like that. So at this point, I can go ahead and trim this big surface out. So I'll type in trim, or I can go up to edit and then trim, and I'll get rid of the extra part of the surface that we don't need. So I've gotten rid of that extra part of the surface, and there's the resulting piece of terrain that I'm going to work with. So I have that piece of terrain. It's set up at 3,400 feet by 2,200 feet, which is what it should be set up at. And if we go back and we revisit this chart again, we've got 2,200 by 3,400. The next thing that I need, and that's what all these columns are, is what is the thickness of the material that I'm going to make this physical model out of. And so I told you before that the model material that we would use, if we were using just standard cardboard, it appears to be 1/8 of an inch thick, but it's actually a little bit thicker than that. It's 5/32 of an inch. So if you were picking a material, you would actually measure it out. We're using 5/32, so I'm telling you that's what it is. And I would come down to my third row here, and at 1 to 200 scale, 5/32 of an inch is 31.25 feet. So that's going to be my contour interval of this piece of terrain. So I'll go ahead and do a contour of this piece of terrain. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. We can call this topo lines. We'll make it active. And then we'll go ahead and contour this. So I'll go up to curve, curve from objects, contour. I'll select this as my object. I'll press enter. I'll pick this corner. Now I need to turn on my endpoint snap to pick that corner. It doesn't matter actually which corner you pick. And I need my contour not to go in the X direction, not to go in the Y direction, but to go straight up in the Z direction. So to do that, I will double click on the perspective view and then look in either the front view or the right side view. It doesn't matter which one, because in either case, I'll be able to get it to go straight up and down. So there it is along the Z axis. And now my distance is that number that we had right here. So we'd come over here and double check 31.25 feet. So let's get back to Rhino, maybe. And we'll type 31.25 feet, and I'll hit enter. And that then builds out the topo lines for this particular piece of terrain. So there it is. Now, once we've gotten to this stage, we can actually turn off the terrain altogether, and we're left with just our topo lines. And now it's time to draw those steps on each side that work our way up. So as I showed you last class, there's two real methods for doing this. The first method would be to create points on all of these endpoints and then rotate those points. So let's do that method. I'll use my single point tool. Actually, I want to click underneath and use the multi-point, this one. I'll make sure my endpoint snap is checked, and then I'll go ahead and create a point on the end of every one of those lines. So I have a point on all the lines. I now want to select all of those points. So I could drag a box to select those points. Alternatively, I could also type SELPT for select point, and it will select all the points for me, which is a little bit easier. Let's rotate that. I'll use the rotate 3D command. I'll go up to transform, rotate 3D. I'll snap to this first point. We'll go off right along that y-axis. Then I'll go straight up and down from the z-axis, and I will fold those points flat. So there they are. Once I have those points folded flat, now it's a matter of connecting the sides. So I'll start here. We'll come over. Remember, I want to be in line. I'll hover. Let me turn on my point snap here. I'll hover over that point. We'll come there. I need to turn on perpendicular. And there it is. Come over. This one's straight across because it's at the bottom. I'm going to come up. Sometimes you have to orbit around because I've got lines in the way here. There's my perpendicular. There it is. So that's at the top of the hill. So in this scenario, because of how I drew it, I need to actually go up 31.25 feet. I need to come over. Oh, that doesn't look right. Sometimes these don't quite look correct. Yep, I made a mistake. Try that one more time. There. There's perpendicular. There's perpendicular. Sometimes it's just about the position that you have your view in, so you can see this really easily. Something's wrong with that point. I created an extra point. Well, neither of those look right. So I'm going to have to go back and see what happened on those points. I'm just going to end that one there. And then we'll work our way through the rest of these. So this one goes down 31.25. We'll come across. And so that's a good point. I'm reading my chat. Hold on. Okay, Angie's saying she finds the point rotate process harder. I agree with you. I always do the other one. Some people conceptually struggle with the, yeah, I'm gonna just end that one there. Some people can struggle with the change the C-plane, the drawing plane. I have a hard time with this one too. So let me select those lines there and there. Let me rotate 3D. And the nice thing about this is once we rotate 3D on this, there to there, you can see what happened and how we got messed up. So from here, this really should have gone straight across to that point, and then it would need to go down to the next point. Looks like I had an extra point there. That was where I got messed up. So let's talk about that C-plane method. right here. Okay, so this is a good. Brooke, you have a good question in this. So this is like yours, where we're coming down to the bottom of a valley right here. So how do we know where that bottom is? Well, if we switch our C-plane, so let's go to set C-plane 3 points. Let's start up here. We want to go straight over in the Y direction. We want to go straight up and down. There it is. Now I can draw in this plane. And when I get to the bottom, so let's start right here and work our way over. We know what my contour interval is. So remember, if this were being set up with cardboard, my lowest layer would be at whatever the thickness of the cardboard was. Oops. So I've got myself to right here. Now I'm in the bottom of the trough. So these two are straight across, but I know that this piece of cardboard would go down the thickness of the cardboard. So it would be 31.25 feet. So whatever my interval is, and apparently I can't draw here, 31.25 feet. There it is, straight down. I'd come over, and then I'd start going back up this side. The opposite of that is at the top of one of these, at the top of a hill, you would just go straight across. So I'd work my way back up this side, creating every one of these steps. Like this. Oops. Okay, so you guys get that idea. We've gone through the set C-plane. I also find that to be the easiest method. Okay, so now that I've done the C-plane, I'm going to go ahead and flip over to the one from last class, so you don't have to watch me do all of the steps, because I finished all of the steps on this one, except I haven't finished the corners just yet. So we have to look at this, and I think imagining that this looks like little layers of cardboard sometimes can be helpful. So each of these is the top edge of a piece of cardboard. So there's the top edge, and the cardboard would be sticking down below it, which is why at the bottom here, we go down, over, and back up. At the top of the piece of cardboard, again, there's that edge of the cardboard. That matches up with this edge of the cardboard. It's just clipped. So that ends up being straight across. And then these stairs all seem to make sense. So let's look at the corners specifically. So in this case, I've got this edge of the cardboard coming to meet that. This needs to then go straight down by the distance of my contour interval. So we'd come down from right there. Oops, let me turn on end snap. From right there, I would need to go down the 31.25 feet. And there it is. In this context, I'm lucky because this meets that. And so I can just trim it off. So I could type trim, and I could get rid of that little piece there, and those meet perfectly at a corner. That doesn't always happen. So in this scenario, it did, but some of these other corners, they won't meet. So let's look at this corner. So I have my steps coming up this side. I need to have a line that continues over here. So let's take a line here. Let's start at this point, and let's continue. And I usually let them run wild at the end. Now this is the next level up. So here's one level, here's the next level up. So this would need to come down the 31.25 feet and then go over to meet this line. So I can start right here, snap down 31.25. There it is, down. And then it needs to come over to this line. Now I'm in the C-plane where I'm only allowed to draw vertically and along the left and right here. However, if I turn on my perpendicular snap, I can snap to perpendicular along that line. There it is. So I can take the point from here, perpendicular to that line, and then I can trim it. I'll take this piece, trim, and trim that off. So the steps come and then they wrap around this corner. So let's work our way along here. We're stepping down. We get to the valley. We go down, over, and back up because this level here is the same as that level there. We work our way up. Here's a top where we come up, over, and back down. Let's look at this corner. So like I did before, I left this one long. Oh, it's actually not correct. You can see that it's on an angle. Sometimes it's even easier to see it if you look at it in the side view. So I messed that up when I created it. See how it's going down on the slant there? We want that line to be going straight. So I would come back to this point and I would need a new line that's going perfectly straight. There it is, going straight. Now, this diagonal line is part of this whole line. The last thing I want to do is select it and say, oh, well, let's just delete it. Well, then I lost all my steps. I don't want to have that happen. So what I'm going to do is when it's selected, I'm going to go up to edit and then choose to explode it. So I go to edit and explode, and that breaks all of these into individual segments. I'll then hold down the control key and deselect that line, I hope, which of course is not working Mac to PC. It's killing me. Okay, so in that scenario, I'm going to have to deselect everything. You could just hold down the control key, deselect it, and then you can join it back together after you've deselected that. I don't get to do that. I'm going to press delete to get rid of that diagonal. Then I will take this line and all those other lines along here. And if you get this lined up correctly, it's not too hard. And I will join all of those back together. I'm going to go to edit and then join. And now those are all joined back together. So I have that set of lines. Then I'm going to go ahead and look at this corner again a little bit more carefully. So right there is the end of the next run, but I need to go from this step over to meet that line at perpendicular. So let me go ahead and select this and press trim. And there we go. I've trimmed that off to make that corner. And let's look at this corner. So this line right here comes around to there, which means that it needs to go straight back like that. So I'll click on this. I'll snap to the end here, and I'll let that one run long. So this is now part of this line. So I could actually join those together. I can go to edit and then join like that. This is the next step. So I would need to go down and then over to meet this. So I'll start with a polyline at that endpoint. I'll go down by 31.25 feet. And then we'll come over and snap to perpendicular. There's my perpendicular point. And now I can go ahead and trim off this piece. So let's take this line as our trim. I'll type trim or go to edit trim, and I can get rid of that piece as well. So I've worked my way around the whole model, and I've seen that everything seems to be going the way it should. Now, sometimes in a model, you end up with, I'm jumping back here for a second, where you have a mistake. Like these steps are higher, and they should actually be down. Right? See how this bottom should have gone down? I started in the wrong place. So in that scenario, I want to go ahead and move these down so that there the valley's in the right spot. And now when I'm coming back up, right, I could connect that, come over and connect that. My C-plane was already in the right plane to draw that. And now the steps work. So sometimes you just run into a problem of how you created it, and you have to go back and modify that. So let's get back to this finished one. Okay, I'm going to reset my C-plane. I'll go here, I'll go to set C-plane, world top. That resets everything back. And now I need to start to conceive of this as a model where I have sides on it. So my low point is way down here. And so when I create a side, when I draw the side, I want to make sure that I'm low enough to clear that point. Usually you want to clear it by at least the thickness of the cardboard. So what I can do is I can reset my C-plane. I'll go to the down facing arrow. I'll go to set C-plane, and we'll do a 3 points. Alternatively, I could just draw this in the other view, and I'll show you both methods here. If I do the C-plane, we want to go off along the x-axis here. And we'll go straight up and down. There's my C-plane. And now I would draw the side. I would come down here further down than where that point is. Then I would come across till I lined up with that corner. I want to make sure it's perpendicular, and then I would come back up. Now that's much, much deeper than it needed to be. So I could cut off a lot of cardboard. Let's say I came up here, turn on my midpoint snap. I could come up maybe to there. I could take that and trim it and get rid of everything underneath. So there's nothing wrong with that as a method. However, I could have, let me delete this for a second. I could have started my line right here without changing the C-plane and then jumped over into either the front or right side view. And by doing that, I can actually kind of see how deep I want this to be. So I can see where my drawing is, like there, for example. I can say, okay, well, that's right at that level. So I want to go a little bit deeper, maybe about there. And then I can come over. I could just leave that long. And I could come back to this point, come down, snap to perpendicular, and then I could trim this off. So we'll use this as a trim for that piece right there. Sorry, I had to press enter once. And there it is. So when I start to create these sides, sometimes people find it helpful to actually create layers for each side, just so you can kind of see it. I usually just have a layer called sides. And let's make that a color so it's a little bit easier to see. And what I want to do is I want to take this side plus this little piece here plus this side all the way along, and I want to join that together. So I'll type in join. Notice that it says 3 curves joined into 1 closed curve. That's what I'm after. And I'll right click and say change object layer, and it's now on the sides layer. Now I have to create the other sides. Now for this side, I actually need to start all the way right to there, and we'll come down. And this would be helpful if I had reset my C-plane. So let's go back to set C-plane. We'll go to world top. And now we can just go off along the y-axis here. There it is. We'll come to this corner and we'll come down, again, snapping to perpendicular. And so let's trim that. Get rid of that extra piece. And I can then take this curve plus this curve plus all of those stairs, and I can join those together. So I'll type join, and then I'll right click on the sides here and say change object layer. And now those are joined together. So you see I'm working through this. Let's just go ahead and jump to the sides layer. That'll save us a little bit of time. We'll start right there, come down to here, we'll go across. Oops, we can just leave it long. We'll find this corner right there, and we'll come down to perpendicular. There's perpendicular. We'll trim. There it is. Then we need to join those together. So I'm going to select that plus my pieces there. We'll join those. Let's take that, put it on the sides layer, change object layer. And then the last one, down, over.
I just want to double check.
Yes.
To go down on the edges, that's 31.25, right? For the corner.
If your scale is the 1 to 200, which is what I did. If your scale was something else, then it wouldn't be that anymore. It would be something different.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So let me join those together. Unable to join curves. What did I do wrong? Okay, that's good. Take this. Just little pieces. All right, one closed curve. So now what I end up with is I end up with all 4 sides created and on the sides layer. So let's fold each of those down flat. So I'll use the rotate 3D command. So I'll type in rotate 3D, otherwise I could go up to transform, rotate 3D. I'll use the bases of each of these as my rotation axis, and I'll fold them down. So there's my first one. Let's take this one here. We'll repeat the rotate 3D. And we'll go from vertical to flat. Next one here, repeat. I'm just right clicking to repeat. Vertical to flat. And the last one, right click to repeat here. And now that's folded flat. So if we were looking at this in the top view, you'd see all 4 of the sides laid out flat. That's perfect. Next piece that we need is we need to project all of these lines flat as well. So let's go ahead and create a new layer, and we'll call this laser cut. Let's make that active. And on that layer, I'm going to create a new surface that's larger than all of my objects. Something like that. Then I'm going to select all of the terrain. Actually, don't need the points. So let me do it this way. Let me right click on topo and say select objects. There we go. Yeah, I still have these points. Let me get rid of the points. So I'm going to type SELPT to select the points, and then I'm just going to delete those. There we go. Now let's select topo lines. And in the top view, like we did before, I'm going to project those lines onto this flat surface. So I'm going to type in project, and I'm going to project them onto this surface, and I'll hit enter. And those should now be on the laser cut layer. So I can go ahead and delete this surface, and I'm left with, if I turned off the other layers, right, those lines that are flat right there. Let's turn back on my sides. Let's take those sides and put them on the laser cut layer as well. I'll right click and say change object layer. Okay, now those are on the laser cut layer as well. We can turn off the sides layer. And so now we have to start prepping this file for an actual laser cut. So let's go ahead and give myself a border around my objects, because I'm going to end up needing that. And then we can pretty much move only into the top view. So there's my top view. So when I start to prep these for laser cutting, something that I need to know is that the bed size of the laser cutter that we have at DVC is 12 by 24. So I like to give myself a border here, and we'll say at 24, 12, except that that's really, really small right now. So I would either need to go back to my reference file here and say, you know, what is 12 by 24 at 1 to 200 scale? It looks like it's 2400 by 4800 feet. So I'd have to do it like that, where I create this and say at 4800 feet, 24 400 feet. That would be the size of the laser cutter bed. Or I could actually scale this whole thing down. And that's really where we're going with it. So if I took everything and I wanted to scale this down so that it's now at 1 to 200 scale, all I need is one of these sides to do it. So I'll select everything. I'm going to go to scale. This is a regular scale, right? So it's not a scale 1D. And I'll say that this side from here to there should be 17 inches. So when I do this and I type 17 inches and I hit enter, everything disappears. And that's because it got so small. Remember, it used to be 3,400 feet. Now it's only 17 inches. So while it's still selected, I'll type Z for zoom, followed by S for selected. And now my objects appear, but they're very different, right? They're much, much smaller than they were. This is now 12 by 24. So now I can start working in those terms. So once again, I could say this is at 24 inches, comma 12 inches, and there's my laser cutter. So each of these sides needs to fit on here. You can rotate, you can feel free to rotate these, but you can't mirror them because they'll turn out wrong. Oops. So I want to take each of these, I want to move them onto the laser cutter bed. Let's take this piece here. Let's move it. And let's move it over a little bit more. And this piece I'm actually going to rotate. Remember, no flipping, but rotating is okay. So let's rotate it from there, -90. Let's move it. All right, and so all of those fall on the laser cutter bed. This is my terrain. So I need two versions of this. And that's because when we create this, and if you watch the video that I have of this being modeled, it'll make a lot more sense. What we do is kind of like shuffling a deck of cards. We cut it twice, and it's every other line that we cut. And then we take one from each pile as we start to assemble it, and they stack onto each other. So I would encourage you to watch that video for how this process actually physically works. I need a second copy. So I'll do that there. And now we need to differentiate what is being cut and what is being engraved. So on the laser cut layer here, I'm going to create two sublayers. One is for cut, and one is for engrave. The cut layer is going to be red, and the engrave layer is going to be blue. And those are specific colors. That's the laser cutter recognizes those cutters or those colors. So I can then take the things I want cut out. So we'll take these four and we'll change them to be on the cut layer. So we'll change objects. Likewise, the rectangular borders that go around these are going to be on the cut layer. Right click, change object layer. They're going to be on the cut layer. Now, when it comes to the topo lines themselves, we have to work our way through each one. And what we want is every other one of these to be red. So if I started here and then held down shift, we'd skip this one, we go to this one. Then we work our way down, we'd skip this and go here. Now this gets a little tricky because this level is the same as that level because it's across a valley. We skip one to here. This one, we don't know. It could be up, it could be down. We'd have to look more carefully. But as long as we're being consistent, we'll be okay. So I'm going to go through and pick every other one. And we'll work our way up here like that. And all of those are going to move onto the cut layer. So let me right click and say change object layer. So those are all going to be on the cut layer. Now in the one directly above here, I'm going to start with the opposite. So instead of picking this one to start, I'll pick this one. So we'll go there and there. It'll be this one. And the good news is you can kind of use the one below as reference. And then we'll work our way up. And we'll work our way here. To there. And now all of these should be on that cut layer. So I'll right click and say change object layer. So they should be opposite each other. The rest of the pieces that I haven't selected, if I were to select them now, they can be put on the engrave layer. So I'll right click and say change object layer. And those would all be on the engrave layer. So these are the files necessary to cut and assemble this model. If I were to go to the laser cutter room, if I had this file in an AutoCAD format, I could actually go ahead and cut it. And so what I'm looking for you guys is to actually show me a screenshot of these red and blue lines and also give me an AutoCAD file. So you're going to give me both. So the screenshot's easy. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see it here. I'd go up to my down facing arrow. I'd go to capture to file, and I'd save this screenshot. The AutoCAD will select all of these. We'll go up to file and then export selected. And we're going to change the save as type from a Rhino 7 model to an AutoCAD DWG file. When I go ahead and click, I have to give it a name here. Call it Laser Cut Spring 2022. And under the export scheme, I'm going to use the 2007 polylines. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And that will then write the AutoCAD file for me, which is the other piece of what you're going to be turning in as part of this exercise and also part of your assignment 202. OK, so I know that was a lot to take in today. There's a lot of kind of steps to this. I will process the lecture and I will post it. If you feel like my lecture isn't up and you need to go back and review something, you can always look at one of my lectures from a previous semester. Look for the 213, and it'll be essentially the same thing that I just went through today. So you can see it there as well. I wish that we could make it so that we could all go in and do this laser cut. Like I said, the lab is open, so you could play around with it if you wanted to, but it's not part of the requirements for the class. You won't physically build this model. However, I want you to get to this phase where you could go to the laser cutter and actually cut it out. Okay, so I know we're kind of running out of time. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I will see my first check-in group back at 12:10. Does anybody have any questions before I let you go? Doesn't look like it. All right, I'll see my first group at 12:10. You guys all have a good day, and I'll see you on Wednesday.